and if you've got any questions, please don't wait for me to just ask. We're here really to learn about prototyping and what really, and I know nothing about manufacturing, which is why I'm always fascinated by the idea of turning a concept into something real. And I think between the four of you, there's probably something like 50, 60 years of experience of turning ideas into real things. So that's very exciting. And I think a lot of us are involved in turning ideas into real things. So I'm just going to very quickly ask you to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about your experience of actually helping people in the journey from taking an idea and making it real. If that resonates. So I'll start with you, Matt.
So, Matt Swan, and I'm working with the Nova Scotia Power Makerspace. I had the joy and privilege over the last year of getting that up and running. Relative to taking ideas and turning them into prototypes, into tangible objects, that really is the purpose of the Makerspace. And it seems, as I look back at most of the places I've worked, that's been a pretty big chunk of what I've been doing. Kind of maybe a firm job to sort of showcase what you're talking about. When I worked for Joe Minczewski and Bill Cody, and Bill did it, often what I would get would be a literal napkin with Bill's sketches and maybe a clunky prototype that he bolted together. And then it was my job to try and take that and turn it into a product. So you're going from him having had an idea and actually made a prototype already, and then me trying to turn it into something pretty. So there's two very distinct things there for sure. But right back from the days of advanced glazings of us coming up with products from an idea and then coming up with machines to make products. Like all of those things are exactly that. So hopefully I've got something to offer.
Perfect, thank you. Rachel.
Next, okay.
Yes, please.
My name is Rachel McKeegan, and I'm a program specialist for Brilliant Labs. So we work primarily with youth, so anywhere from primary right up to grade 12. I work a lot in the school system directly, helping with projects, helping to teach teachers how to integrate technology into the curriculum. But then we are also co-located in the makerspace, and so we have a space there that's dedicated just for youth, for them to take what you can imagine is fantastic ideas and make them into reality too. So I've been working with kids in technology for probably over 10 years now, so I feel a little privileged. It's a great job.
So Rachel, what were you doing before? You were doing Brilliant Labs?
Yeah, I was a developer for a couple of years. So I web development, some app development. But before that, I worked for the Community Access Program. So I did a lot of similar programming to Brilliant Labs, but in the community and not just in schools.
Okay. So David, you're a machinist.
I'm a machinist. I have a no-rate ticket and a tool and die ticket. But I'm also have a diploma in automated manufacturing. I've been in the industry for 40-some years now. I spent 20 years at Magna. In there, I did a lot of prototyping. They'd come to me if they had a new gauge or something that, again, the card says you can get it on napkin sometime. Make us one of these. And a lot of time too, I get a picture of a part. We're going to have to set up a line to make this work. Can you make one to make sure that it's going to work in our system? Or actually, I brought a couple of samples here to make the prototype, basically to figure out how we're going to set the line up, best equipment to use to run the line, that type of thing. And then on the side, I've done some consulting to different companies as to how to best make the product, because even though we have ideas sometimes on a wonderful part we want to make, yeah, that works great, but it's going to be hard for a machine to make it, whereas I have so much experience at machining parts, knowing how the dies work, that kind of thing. I advise people, yeah, that's a beautiful idea, but I think this little change, that little change to make it work in production, mass production, whatever the case may be.
Thank you very much, David. Welcome, and thank you very much for making the time for us. Justin.
Yeah, I'm Justin Lewis. I'm originally a machinist turned mechanical engineer. I worked for a lot of different companies around the local area. I've worked in large industry, right down to small companies like the one I just started for myself, which is why I'm here looking like I can fix the air conditioning. I've worked with prototyping on all scales. It's one of those things, you don't want to get too invested in your prototypes or one of these things. You got to go through a bunch of different cycles depending on what industry you're in. But one of the things that I find I can bring to the table is, like Dave, I have some industry hands-on experience where, if you're building a prototype, sometimes it's handy to be able to recommend materials that are going to exist, for when you're done. Sometimes you can design things that, if you had thought of this material before you started, you might have cost you half as much because manufacturers make steel in inch sizes and not in quarter inch. Like that. So that industry experience coupled with the theoretical is very important.
Right. Thank you very much. Looking forward to really getting into some really interesting cross-section of experiences. I'm going to ask you all, what question, I'm going to give you some time to think about it, what questions do you hope you get asked tonight? Because I really want you to think about how you want to engage with the audience. So have a think about the question you hope you're asked tonight. And what I would like you all to do as well is think about why you're here and what you want to learn off today. So I'm going to ask people to make this as interactive as possible. So if I can start with you, Rachel, what question do you hope you're asked?
This didn't give me very much time.
Okay. think about what questions you want to ask. I just want to make sure you get out of this. Because I've been to enough conferences where the panel were full of expertise, but you never quite get the expertise that you came there for, and you just didn't ask a question.
I hope I get asked about what projects the students have been working on in Atlantic Canada, because we have had some amazing projects that students are making, under 18.
David.
Actually, a lot of them, but I guess one of the most important things to watch for when you're going to make a prototype, and again, it's just simple material, things about shapes, sizes, appearance, what appeals to people, that kind of thing.
Justin?
Kind of like I find one of the important things when you're going through a prototype is kind of your mental approach to it, and how you think about what you're going to build and how you get mentally invested into it, and kind of how to get started in that process and what would be a good kind of path to follow.
Matt?
I would probably like to be asked what the makerspace could do to facilitate getting ideas to prototypes.
Good. So if you actually have a question that's already going to be answered, great. If not, what questions, just very quickly. Kevin, do you have a question you hope that gets answered?
Yes, Rachel was mentioning that you'd be amazed at the ideas that the bright kids come up with. Okay? What are some examples of the bright ideas that the kids come up with, and how do you facilitate the evangelization?
That's great. So Kevin, can we just hold on? I just want to grab a group of questions, and then, but if you could, Rachel, if you could talk, that's great. Sean, do you have what kind of questions would you like to ask?
Those are pretty good suggestions. I can't think of
Okay, no worries. Anybody else like that? Yeah.
Sorry, I've literally put my hand up, but it's still I'm interested in understanding about prototyping in the big scheme of business planning, and where does that fall on the plan, basically, or the timeline?
Good. Yeah. Patsy.
I had just briefly discussed the fact that I was wondering about materials and machinery and the possibilities of machinery that's not here. Instead of using the softest plastic, could there be possibly silicone? So it's how can we go further with what's not here?
Good. Thank you. Any other questions? Just to really help the panelists focus in on what you're going to speak about. Johnny.
My granddaughters, I've been very interested in getting into software development at an earlier age with some of the programs. So anything that will enlighten me as to how to go with that process.
So I hope that's actually helped the panelists know roughly what the audience wants to know, and it's told the audience what the panelists are hoping to get asked. So if we could start with you, the great question Kevin asked, and the question you hoped you'd be asked. And Johnny has a question as well, as you know.
I will have a question for you.
Yeah.
You have a question as well?
But it would be more directed towards you, I think, as opposed to the panel. And my question would be, with regards to prototyping, what are the sources of funding for assisting people in developing prototypes?
Perfect. Well, I think we've got Holly and Stephen here today, so I think Holly and Stephen will be able to answer that question better than I could. And we'll come back to that, Holly and Stephen. So you got to answer that. Just not working.
He's on that leave. He's not.
I knew something was off. You're wearing a very conservative shirt. I knew something was off. So, Rachel.
So some examples of what students have been doing across Atlantic Canada. It's amazing, just locally here, there's a student who's working on building a satellite that may eventually go up into space. So it's not gonna like be launched up, but it can go up with one of the space missions. So there's a program that allows students to be able to develop satellites, so he's working on that. We've got a couple of students in New Brunswick that actually have patents or provisional patents on ideas. One of them is a shoe insert that uses like an ultrasonic sensor to alert the person. It's for somebody who has a visual disability, to alert the person if there's bad weather outside. So to sort of like make sure that they're not going to slip or anything like that. So it has a sensor like an insole that will give them like a little buzz kind of thing if there's anything sort of on the ground. There's also a student who's working on, he's got a provisional patent on, it's almost like a light, but it's more like a laser that kind of comes out in front of your bike. So it comes out like, I think 10 feet or something like that. So it notifies cars kind of what the path of the bike is going to be. There's lots of cool stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to that. Yeah.
Apps that have been developed. The one that I think of most clearly as a student, and we kind of have this around here, but in New Brunswick, they do not have it, where it would notify all the students when there's a snow day. So like, of course, that's a very priority for students.
What was the age of the kids, the youngest?
We work from everybody from primary right up to grade 12. So there's not a lot of kids in primary that are developing things that you get a patent for, but it's the high school years. So the program actually started in New Brunswick, so it's a little further along. That's why you see most of the students that are getting the patents and provisional patents have had, 5 years to go through the Brilliant Labs program, and we just started a few years ago here in Nova Scotia. So
Like 10 to 15 years old is the biggest bunch of young people.
yeah, the ones that I see the most are actually probably between the ages of like 8 and 14.
Yeah.
After that age, unless they're super interested in it, they sort of go off into like Fortnite or gaming or something like that. But yeah, for the kids that are really interested, we have a lot of resources. So we have on staff like an engineering residence that can help them like just putting things together in terms of like prototyping if you needed a certain microcontroller and things like that. We actually developed our own microcontroller that works with a lot of the different educational products that are out there that makes it a lot easier for kids to prototype. So yeah.
What was the mix of boys versus girls?
In the younger levels, it is a really close mix. Like there's just as many girls as there are boys. As they get a little bit older, it does tend to skew more towards males, and we're definitely trying to fix that. The staff at Brilliant Labs is geared more towards women. Like we have more women than we do men, so we are trying to set that example to young girls. But it is a thing that we notice in schools and we notice in our programming too.
Thank you very much. So I want to ask the three of you the same question, if I may, which is, a lot of people are going to come to you, and I like the way you all use the idea of literally having work with napkins. What is a guaranteed way? A lot of startups here who want to develop a product, physical product. Tell me a guaranteed way to make sure a prototype on a napkin doesn't work. What are the common causes of failure for a prototype not being successful? David, in your experience.
A lot of times when I find when a prototype is drawn on a napkin, not always, but a lot of times, you're sitting around discussing, and I'm sure we've all had college break. You're sitting there and all of a sudden, wow, I just got an idea. And first thing is, the nearest thing is the napkin or whatever, you sketch it out, and there's my idea. But unfortunately, at that point in time, it was a brilliant idea, but there's a lot of things that you didn't quite think of. Things that, hey, that's great, but it's not quite going to work, because you got to really sit back and think a little more on that idea, what you put forward. And I find, because I've dealt a lot with apprentices and stuff, when someone puts an idea down on a napkin, when you're discussing with them, especially, I mean, you must be aware of this one, when you're talking to students, well, you don't look, I would say, forget it, that ain't ever working. It's, yeah, but it's a beautiful idea. Think with this, you know, think with that or whatever. Let's try this or try that. And then when they go away and rethink, oh, okay, yeah, that's not going to work. Or, oh, I can change that. Now you're thinking that. Never when you get one on that, and even if you see right away, don't chop it up right away. Don't chop someone's idea down right away. Button down easy, I guess, some of it. A lot of them are good, but there's a lot, it's an instant thing to come in the head. And yeah, it's a good idea, but let's modernize that more.
So keep thinking, keep changing idea, but be supportive.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Justin.
Question, sorry, just like to follow up on what you just said. I'm not a software engineer, but I've worked in software engineering, and this just reminded me of the steps in development. Are there really steps in development for a prototype, like from having an idea here to an idea there, and then to making the first one, and then testing it, and in each of those steps, I think what you just implied is that you've got the napkin, but then there's a critical review. Somebody like a panel of experts or somebody that weren't involved with that has come along and said, let's just challenge that, not to be critical as in to drive it to fail, but critical as it to make it to work. I can imagine that input's going to be very important to that prototyping, so you've got more collective thought on it. So are there stages of a life of a prototype, and then in each of those stages, are there critical reviews that if you don't do correctly, as you understand it, thinking about the materials, thinking about the tools that you've got available to you and what they can work with, you can make it quicker, faster, cheaper, or it's going to fail.
So can I just ask, if I may, can I just ask Justin, and then we'll come back to David? Justin?
Yeah,
I think I incorporate as well.
That's actually kind of where I was going with the answer, you know, to what Dave said. On the kind of the other side of that coin is to, you know, my advice for people who are going to make a prototype is don't be too invested in your first idea. It's gonna fail. You're gonna go through these steps where you go through the process. You're not gonna start with your first concept and build it all the way up into a finished product and then go, no, I'm gonna come back. You're gonna fail at that first level lots of times, more times the better. So in terms of review, you know, for your first stage prototype, you go from a napkin, you know, I would suggest something, you know, on the level of glued together with popsicle sticks. You know, something that's just, you know, it's not really, you know, this is not going to be a finished product, but a lot of people draw it on a napkin and go, okay, next thing I'm going to machine it out of aluminum, or I'm going to do this expensive prototype, and that's a mistake. There's a lot of levels in between where you want to be failing in those levels, so you circle back to find out what you need to do at the beginning. And what you're really doing through those iterations and finding those failures is you're finding the critical criteria that your prototype needs to be based on. And a lot of times, your intuition on your first kind of napkin sketch are going to be 90% correct, but you can have a failure hiding in that 10%. So you want to run through it a bunch of times and make sure you beat it. And then once you get through that first stage, then you're going to move up into the bigger and bigger prototypes until, you know, you kind of ran on failures. You know, it's kind of what you want to do.
So can I ask Matt for your perspectives on, like, so people are going to come to you in the makerspace. What is it you really hope they do before they come and see you?
A lot of it has to do with mindset, and I agree with what you said. The idea of celebrating being able to kill an idea, we don't think that way very often. It's like, got a great idea, can't wait to see how soon I can prove that it's no good. Because inventive nature, we fall in love with our ideas, and then we support them whether they're good or not. And to have that ability to step back and critically review, say, you know what, this idea might be beautiful, and I'm going to make, you know, $100 a year on it. Well, like, who cares, right? But to be able to look at it and not fall in love with it, and to critically kill it as soon as you possibly can. Then if somebody's on board with that approach, then you can go through your steps, very, very small iterative proofs of concept, and see what you can do with it. Now Alan McMillan, I'm not going to pick on your name, but when Alan and I worked, and Steve too, I guess, at Advanced Glazings, it almost became a sport to stand in front of a whiteboard and take each other's ideas for products and for equipment and beat each other up really bad as much as we could. What came out of that was awesome products and great equipment.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So now that we've actually done, any questions? Any questions?
I think so, yeah. Except for maybe the proof of concept, because that's a final bit, isn't it? So how do you, making it is one thing, well, coding it or physically making it, building it, and then you want to, like with the install for the somebody who's slightly impaired, proving that's going to be, we're hanging over a task. I would have thought, that's going to be the harder bit, I would have thought, to make sure it actually does what you say it's going to do, because there you've got a legal implication, I would have thought as well, those steps must be extremely important for them to do. Really what I'm trying to get at is there anything, is there a way to prototype? Is there, like in software engineering, I know there are methodologies in software engineering. Are there methodologies for prototyping? Is there a management system I can go and say, this is how the best practice for prototyping is, so that you can actually then apply to your own domain in the way relevant to your domain? Is there anything there at all?
So Rachel, can I just ask you, especially when you're dealing with children and the sheer volume of ideas, and really liking the points that I think David made about not killing the idea. How do you get the kids to keep going, but to give them a robust framework in terms of next steps? How do you manage that tension?
Yeah, we're not really into the business at this point of taking the idea to market necessarily. Like, we are trying to get the kids interested in making things, knowing that they have the ability to do that, being okay with failure. That's a difficult thing for students in the school systems today. And kids actually are really resilient to that idea of like, oh, that's not gonna work, but they're so hopeful that they're cool with iterating and like trying something new. They don't have the same personal, it doesn't seem like to me, at least in the kids that I've encountered, have that same personal like identification with the idea that they have. So they don't seem to get as like, this is my baby, this is like, they're just like, oh, that's the problem. And if that's not how we're gonna solve it, we're gonna figure out another way. So what we do is try and bring resources to bear on that. So, if this microchip isn't gonna work to make, the sensor work, then we'll try something else. I'm not sure if I answered the question or not, but yeah, we really do try to encourage the students to create something, and not every student wants to take it to the point of a patent, and not every student wants to, they just want to use that project to learn a specific skill. So to learn about soldering or to learn about coding. And so we always, when they come with an idea, are just like, let's figure out a way to make it happen.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you fund the patent applications, or is that something they have to do?
We sometimes do.
Oh,
So we do have a project fund that teachers can apply to. So if there's like a school that's involved in it, that could be something that we could do. And sometimes we get little bits of money that are specifically for entrepreneurial efforts, and we take it from that pot.
Because it can get expensive.
Yeah.
So,
I'd just like to make a comment on the whole thing that, as I said, about the killing idea. If I'm sitting down with anyone in here that I don't know very well, or that I know, like when I worked in a big manufacturing facility, we had a great thing called continuous improvement. People came with ideas, and that was a very strong point where I wouldn't kill someone's idea. Hey, not going to think of this, think of that. But if I'm in a team, if it was Justin and I, Matt, sitting together, it'd be the way Matt was talking there, that we know each other. Hey, I got a great idea, and I'm under the understanding that they're going to point out, they know they can tell me, hey, that ain't the damn, come on. That's a great, that's a different work environment, because we know that, hey, we can talk to each other like that, okay. But someone that's just starting out, that's got an idea, I'm not going to go right away and not like it the damn. I'm going to do as I said originally. Ease into it, hey, yeah, that's a pretty good idea you got there. Maybe you want to look at this or look at that. Knowing full well that, hey, this ain't going to work, but let them down easy. But as I said, when I'm in a group with people that we've been working together, we know each other well, like, let me pick it apart for you, let me see if I can find a problem with it. I think it's best to find it now. So it depends on who you're working with at the time. Is the ones that work with the students, they're gonna wanna be, you don't wanna kill them right off the bat. And that's, oh, I'm never doing this again. You wanna go easy on it.
Thank you. So I want to, again, Justin, you made a very good point about incremental, about the fail here, fail multiple times here. But at what point, you know, I love that quote, perfection is the enemy of getting it done. At what point do you launch and then, you know, just go with it? And how many kind of revisions does it need?
That's a tough question. That all depends on the context of what you're making. And, you know, when we talk about prototype, we're talking something very broad here. I'm sure everyone here has an idea of what prototyping is in their head, but depending on whether you're talking about software or a product you hold in your hand or a paper machine that's the size of a building or even a process that, you know, doesn't actually exist. You know, it's going to be different approaches that you're going to take. The most important thing is that as you kind of come into this at the lower levels where you want to fail fast and fail early, that's helping you understand the criteria that your prototype is going to need to meet. So that's kind of the point where you get the feel of going, okay, this is what it's going to look like when it's finished. These are the boxes it needs to check, and you develop that early on. And then once you can get to that place reliably, that's when you can check all those boxes. That's when, okay, I'm ready to move from proof of concept to production model or whatever.
And is it okay to launch an ugly product? As in, do you have to get it beautiful in day on the first iteration, or is it okay to say it will do the job, it'll be ugly, but it'll do the job, and then we'll work towards making it beautiful? Is that?
Well, when it comes to product, I think it's more of a marketing thing. Like if your market is maybe an industrial process or something where, you know, the client may think, okay, I want the job done, you know what I mean? Yeah. If it's a consumer product, yeah, no, you've got to have it pretty, you know, so that depends on what market you're going into and what type of product you're going to produce.
I guess one good question would be, why do we prototype? So in terms of like prototyping, you know, we're bouncing around here a bit, but there's proof of concept. So that may be, you know, a significant reason to prototype is because you have to create a prototype to prove that this darn thing's going to work. Right. You know, so why do we prototype? And that's essentially, you know, that's a good question to ask yourself or, you know, when you're going forth with the new product development process. And in terms of prototyping itself, you were asking about process. I mean, prototyping is, in essence, just one aspect of the new product development process. And that process in itself typically follows, you know, the stage gate process, or whatever the case may be. You move to one stage, you check it out. If there's a gate, well, do we go beyond this gate? You know, what's the next step? And, you know, it's bit by bit, right? So that's where you're gonna stumble into your failures or your successes, and you're gonna decide at some point in the process, is it worth going forward with? Exactly. Or can you afford to go forward with it, or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, it's just one part of the new product development process, the way I see it.
So I think the question was, the question was, why do a prototype? Which I thought was a very good question. And also, if I could tie that into that, why do we need, because I think it ties into why do we need make space?
For a long time, I've sort of followed this methodology, a bit to your point, and Blair's as well. You form an idea. Why do you form that idea? Well, maybe it's artistic expression, right? You just have this idea and you just want to see it in real life. Maybe it's for making money, whatever. You form the idea. Taking that to a functional item, you know, call it minimum viable product, call it whatever you want, but it's functional. And look at it. You know, that's going to be different all across the different worlds. That's how many loops. I have no idea how many loops because it totally depends on the type of development. You form the idea, you get it to functional, and from there, your advancements are make it fancy, right? That's really what you're into at that point, and that can take a bunch of iterations. If it's something you're building for your own manufacturing facility, you're probably not going to do much of that. If it's something that you're building to sell and it's going into an industrial world, you might do a little bit of it. If you're doing something and it's going to be, like Dave's world where you're making 100,000 of something, you probably want to put a fair bit of effort into the fancy. I can't go much deeper in process because they're all different per item. But to answer that part of your question, to throw the makerspace into that, what we are trying to do is create a facility where the equipment is there and the expertise is available among the members. So that if a person does have an idea, project.
Great, thanks. Kevin, you have a question?
Yes, I think one of the key things, the secrets to prototype development is fail, sail, and tail. Okay? First attempt is learned, second attempt is learned, third attempt is learned. Because, I think there's two fundamental kinds of products for prototype development. One would be one where there's little technology involved. For example, if I come up with a bird cage, okay, and I want you guys to figure out how's the best way to make the cheapest, good-looking bird cage. That's one kind of development. Okay? All the technology is known. Okay? But I'm developing a wood chip gasifier. Okay? I get this hot flash, put it down in the napkin, okay, and it's going to work the first time, and I try it. Then I find out how little I knew about gasification. Okay? And then on the second attempt, okay, I cured a lot of them on the first, through the first prototype. I learned an awful lot about the technology, okay, and I make a much better gasifier the second time. But then I show up second level problems that I hadn't foreseen, okay, and then I can zero in on. Okay, so it's not a question of, I don't care what the damn thing looks like. It's a question of identifying the fundamental features or problems or technology that I wasn't smart enough to pick up on the first go. Okay? And then, so the prototype is basically an education system that tells you what you really, really need to know to get this technology working.
Yeah. That's exactly why Brilliant Labs does what it does.
Yeah.
Is because once a student is working on a project and they're invested in it, and it came from their own idea, even if it's something that they're working on with another group member, they're the ones, if they need to learn how to do trigonometry better to make that work,
Yeah.
no problem, because they're invested. And they're like, yeah, I'll learn that skill to make that happen.
Along the same lines, okay, I come up with this idea.
I'll come back to you. I just want to make sure that everybody, because we've only got about 10 minutes left. So I will come back to you. I just want to make sure that, because Patsy had a question as well about materials.
No, it's actually not necessarily you start PMP and then you branch up and out. But for me, in the case where I saw the software and what I wanted out of it as a parent and a teacher, I started really grand. And then I looked at the similar products and looked at the hundreds and hundreds of reviews from professionals and from parents. And I highlighted the similarities. And then I actually did custom discovery and I cut it down even more. So the opposite is also true. That you can start with something that you want and then you cut it way back.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
I think thinking that the grand thinking is beautiful because you're seeing the context for everything you're doing.
Absolutely, you can answer everyone's question.
Yeah, but the only way you're really going to affect that space is if you have a product and then, you start filling that void with one item.
Matt, can I ask you to tell us the story about your mum that you told us yesterday over lunch, which I loved?
Oh, yeah.
I loved.
So, my mother, when she was probably 20 or so, her eyes started to go and she needed glasses. So, I don't know where she found them, but she found eye exercises. And one of the eye exercises that she was doing actually made her glasses go away for about 20 years. But, she would teach me this when I was younger. You hold your thumb right there and then, look something way beyond it and just keep working back and forth. And that's an eye exercise. Just keep focusing, making sure you can see there and close. And I think, John, you can expand on this, but the idea is if I can quickly, in my mind, go between seeing the industry and seeing my product, and my thumb is a whole lot smaller than the scenery, it'll help me to put my decisions in context. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was because I think entrepreneurs, it's an impossible job because you have to be focused on this and see there, and it's a really difficult job. And we know a lot of entrepreneurs who are good at that bit, but can't do this bit, and equally, a lot of entrepreneurs who are good at this bit, but can't see beyond, and it's really difficult. kids somehow manage to do both. Kids are really good at doing both.
They don't get that love.
Yeah, yeah.
They're great with that first product, made it a possible thing.
Absolutely. No, I just feel that it's always amazing how quickly time goes by. We've had about 5 or 6 minutes. Are there any other quick questions? Just quick questions from our team. There's a lot of expertise there. So I want to ask you, what about use of visualization as a tool? You know, especially as a sales tool, at what point are you comfortable as someone working with a prototype to actually go out and say, yeah, you can use these visualizations, what the product would look like?
Depends who you're selling to.
Again, the industrial versus consumer that Justin alluded to.
I'd like to make just a little
Please.
comment there, a little bit of experience I just had lately, and anybody wants to see it afterwards. A friend and I come up with an invention idea, and I went through the design, a lot of painstaking hours, designed it, and had a prototype made. It was made of steel, and put it together, and so my buddy come over when I finally got the parts and put it together, come over and put it up against the wall and looked at it, said, wow, it does exactly what we want, it's beautiful. And he said, well, my spouse ain't buying that. If she went to a book, to get a bookshelf, which is what it is, didn't take one look at that steel thing and say, even though it's painted, whatever pretty color you want it painted, he ain't buying it. And I said, you know what, you're right. Right away, the appeal of the project is like, oh my God, what do we do? So I said, okay, Shane, you know, I've seen it a couple of weeks and I have my own wood shop. So I went to work and I made it in wood, and then all of a sudden there's a beautiful bookcase. And then looked at it and said, yeah, our wives would go into a book, spend a store, furniture store and buy that bookcase, but they would not buy that. By building that prototype, or that prototype, and standing back and looking at it, functionally did everything they wanted. Being a guy, Andrew, it's steel, how strong, it's beautiful, but no.
Just to explain what Dave is talking about here, it's actually a bookcase that goes under an egress window in the basement, bolts to the wall, and in case of fire, you pull out the bottom and it becomes a set of stairs. So it's not just a bookcase, it's a great product.
Wow.
But that's just, I want to bring that in just to show people there's one of the reasons for prototype. Say, we thought it looked good, but when he said, my wife would not buy that. She walked into, and a lot of wives wouldn't, guys, yeah, not just steel, but no, ain't buying that. Okay.
I've been there, I hate to wait software engineering again, I'm not a software engineer, but one of the first things I had to correct when I became the quality manager of this office that had 2,000 IT guys was just that one point. They got that functional issues, not emotional issues, not migration issues. They were purely functional. They missed everything else, and that's one of the first things I had to address, because they were making something that nobody wanted. It didn't look right, didn't feel right. You know, it's great to get this great alarm tucked in the corner there, but the guy in the industry wanted it in his face, telling him that the price of the dollar is the sky. Totally missed the point. And that's a very interesting issue. It's not just function, it's a lot of emotional especially.
You know, here, particularly for consumer products, when we're, you know, when we say we're designing a prototype, well, we're not really. We're designing a customer experience.
Right.
So the customer needs to have a whole, so that those are design criteria that you need to factor in the prototype. That's where sometimes it's nice where you do, when you get into more industrial processes, does it work? Good, that's great. That's all we really want.
So I'd like to ask a question, really building on that. What is, apart from the obvious, and let's just assume it's a consumer product, and again, all 4 of you have a lot of experience on this. What is the critical difference in your experience between a prototype and a perfect product? Matt.
Your prototype is not going to be developed in the exact way that you're going to manufacture usually. You know, you 3D print a prototype, but you injection mold your final. One costs you $35, the other's 35 cents. Like there's a very big difference in method of manufacturing. There's a very big difference usually in aesthetics. Those would be the 2 big ones that come to mind. The amount of time that goes into a prototype, you know, that's probably more my world compared to mass manufacturing, where, you know, Dave has had the privilege of spending what, how many million to set up a line to pump it up.
So, Mike, just if I can just talk personal very quickly, I invested in a company, it's the first time I invested in a company that actually manufactured. and I didn't realize about manufacturing risk because we had delivered a prototype, the prototype worked, but we just couldn't get it manufactured. So there was and I never realized there's this big risk that you can get a prototype to work, but that's not the same as being able to produce lots of them at a good price and get all of them to work. Justin, and did you want to say anything about the difference? Really, so entrepreneurs understand in terms of launching the prototype versus the perfect product.
And that's kind of what me and Dave were getting at with materials. I mean, the fact that you can buy a 2x4, not a 1x3.5, or you know what I mean? Like, just simple things like that is where people with hands-on knowledge that know, the difference between die cast or, machining or all these different processes and can look at your prototype, that's kind of where you want to be in the mid-level of your prototype. Like I said, you're going to go through the cycles, at low level. At the low level cycles, you don't really need to worry about that. You just want to get something that's kind of a proof of concept. But as you move up that kind of chain and you start getting some traction, you really want to start thinking about manufacturing earlier on, because there can be a huge swing in the amount of money it's going to take you to produce something by just simply tweaking the design to accommodate materials that are commonly available. Sure.
David?
Along the same lines as Justin there, when I did quite a few patent searches on a few other patents I worked on and stuff, and I see a lot of things in the patent office that people had these beautiful, wonderful ideas, but no, because of the different industries I'm in and manufacturing, look at it and say, the reason that's not the market is because that would be an extremely expensive part to make. No one's paying $1,000 for a little curve to go on the side of the thing, that kind of thing. So it's very important to, once you get the idea, yes, you can 3D print or anything, but once you get the idea, okay, what do we have to do? As they said, tweak it so that, hey, it can be produced very cheaply, because that's a big thing. And whatever you can produce an object for, it's going to, whoever's selling it is going to sell for 3 or 4 times what it costs to make it. Right. So you got to remember that.
Just a comment too, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Whenever people talk about going from prototype to manufacturer, it's the common example is the one that was given with, you start with 3D print, you know, an injection mold. But something that I'm curious about, because I see it, there's a whole nother industry where instead of trying to make things cheaper, they make things that people are willing to pay $1,000 for right away. Like, I have clients that build cameras, for example. Nothing special about these cameras except the cases they're in, but they'll sell them for $25,000, $30,000 each. They cost $4,000 to machine, but that's a pretty good ROI. And that's just one example. So what are your thoughts on that, and how you think access to some of the machining and other facilities could play to that? Because people do get hung up on this consumer product, got to be high volume, and unless you've got access to the investments and a track record, like in my experience, it's not going to happen. So what I do see happen over and over again is people who have identified a niche where there are customers who are willing to pay the money to go after it, and they can produce that product. Any thoughts on that? How the makerspace could play a role with that?
When you're comparing, singularly produced prototype versus mass produced, that's one comparison.
Yeah.
And to the prototype done on a 3D printer versus injection mold. What you're talking is more of a mass in another direction of dollars, right?
Yes.
So you can.
Nothing wrong with that.
Not at all. You can put the time in and make 10. And when you've made 10, you've made as much money as if you went laterally and made 100,000 or something else. If that's the business model, that's great. That's fabulous. As far as the maker space, I would like to think that that's most of what would be needed for those kinds of projects. Absolutely.
That's where I see the term job title of business and manufacturing risk. That's a tremendous mitigation for the manufacturing risk. And I've seen, in my experience, at least a dozen small companies tremendously well by following that model and putting their effort into what are effectively high-value market problems. And I think this goes to separating. There's brilliant technical things you can build. There's lots of valid reasons to do that, but it doesn't mean anyone would ever pay for it. Likewise, there are things that people pay a tremendous amount of money for that aren't available. And sort of being able to look at both of those scenarios is a good thing to be able to do.
And that's a lot of what we do at Brilliant Labs, is like bespoke one-off projects that the students all work together on. So at Riverview, they're working on this project that's integrating the tech class and also the art class to create this big tree that's gonna have light up NeoPixel LEDs that go along it. And it's to remember missing and murdered Aboriginal women. And so each student has to research a missing woman, and then they have to program the circuit to light up, and they're gonna have to like say something about their life, and it's gonna be a really beautiful project. It's not something that somebody's gonna pay money for or anything like that, but the lessons that the students are learning about prototyping is amazing.
Beautiful. So, thank you very, very, very much for your time. Thank you. That was a great. So, thank you for joining me in thanking the panel. Thank you. Holly, do you have some announcements to make? Or?
Yeah, so thank you, Promjock, for facilitating. Thank you, panel. I think I can see for you guys that you're going to hang around a bit, have some pizza. If people have more questions, feel free to mosey on up to these folks and ask them. We do have some prizes that we're giving out. I think the Home Depot or the Home Hardware one is very appropriate tonight. So you can get your name in for the draw in our little TecSocial box over there. If you don't have a business card, we do have little cards for you. Yeah, so thank you.
Can I mention that if anybody's interested in going for a walk in the makerspace, I'll wander down there in just a few minutes and open the doors.
Yes. And if anybody's interested